Well, good morning, everybody. Today I thought I would talk about a car model that was never made but should have been. Now, there was a pretty popular car, reasonably popular car, in the 1960s and 70s called the AMX by American Motors. And although a lot of the earlier models of the car had a fairly sedan look to them, later on they actually did get pretty sporty. And a lot of companies were making models of the AMX, including Palmer, AMT, MPC, and Johan. So the AMC cars are reasonably well represented, especially their Jeep series. But there was one car that was made by American Motors that was a sports car that was intended basically to be a competitor for cars like the Pantera. And this was the somewhat famous AMX III. Now, most of you guys who watch this channel know that cars are not my strong suit, but recently I stumbled on to the story that I'm pretty sure the car guys are already familiar with when the missing AMX III was found. And apparently the very, very, very short story is when AMC decided to get into the mid-engine sports car market, they designed what was apparently a pretty impressive car, which they called the AMX III. And it does resemble a Pantera in many ways. The company was not very flush with cash at the time, and the car eventually languished for a series of reasons, although they did make a number of chassis. You can probably go out on Wikipedia or pretty much any place online and see the story behind it, and it gets a little complicated. And it raised a lot of eyebrows. And apparently it raised enough eyebrows that Ford felt that they did not need the competition for their Pantera series. So amongst many, many other things, and I mean, this story involves Renault, the French, the Germans, Ford, AMC, and even the Pentagon, because AM General was a military defense contractor, and that meant that companies that do military defense work for the United States, especially at that time, had real issues with any kind of foreign ownership. But I'm getting off point. The thing is that no one ever made a model of the AMX III, at least not that I could find. And I find that kind of surprising because the car apparently in its time was quite the impressive machine that caught a lot of attention. Of course, there are issues getting the rights to make the car, and maybe model car companies felt that, well, it never went into serial production, it won't be popular, but there are a lot of cars that never went into serial production that are still popular. So I'm a little surprised that no one ever decided to go ahead and make a kit model of the car. When you think about it, the car cost such a splash at the time that I'm pretty sure, at least in the short term, it would have been a pretty big hit. Of course, I could be completely wrong. But there were so many versions of the AMX, especially the 1969 version, made by kit model companies, that it just seems that somebody would have seen the AMX III as an opportunity to make something new and different. But it never did get produced, at least not that I'm aware of. After over 20 years in storage, and it's one of those kind of mystery stories about cars, apparently when the decision was made not to produce the car, a former employee managed to acquire it, and it literally was in a barn for about 20 or 30 years until a post online, somebody caught up image of a corner of the car and was able to figure out what it was, and that started the whole thing that led up to, there's several online videos about this, it led up to some pretty complicated negotiations for the car to be acquired. And personally, I think it looks awesome. I would have not hesitated to drop $10,000 or $12,000 on a car like that, which is really all they were planning to ask for when it first came out, although that probably would not have been profitable for the company. The car was, I think, partly made by the Italians, and there was a lot involved. And the Pantera was still cheaper. But still, it's a really interesting story. And one of you car guys should probably go ahead and do a history of that car. In fact, that might be something for someone like Lucas C. to knock out, because this is his wheelhouse. But I just found it very interesting that the car not only was not produced, and apparently, if you want to believe what I saw on Wikipedia, part of the reason was Ford actually paid the cash-strapped company money straight up to not produce the car because they didn't want competition for the Pantera. But I think it's a beautiful car, at least to look at, and it's a really interesting story. I would assume the people who have the car today would be thrilled to have a kit model of it available. I think it's a beautiful car, and it makes me wonder what other really interesting cars or vehicles out there that never had a kit of them made. So the question of the day is, What model car or model vehicle would you like to see put into production that never was and you think should have been? Well, guys, that's all I've got for this morning. Those models aren't going to build themselves, so I'm out to the tarbus. Take care of yourselves, and as always, model on.